It's one of the most astonishing aviation disasters in modern history. Air France Flight 447, bound from Brazil to Paris, vanished 3 hours into the flight. 228 people were lost, flying aboard a state-of-the-art automated jet so foolproof it was called unstallable. So what went so catastrophically wrong? Well, here's 2020 co-anchor Elizabeth Vargas with a special Nightline Investigates.
It is May 31st, 2009. Air France Flight 447 prepares to depart Rio de Janeiro. 7:30 p.m., takeoff. It is a routine 11-hour flight across the Atlantic. The plane is filled with vacationers, businessmen, and families. Destination, Paris. 8:30 p.m., passengers settle in. There is no sign that one of the biggest mysteries in modern aviation is about to unfold. Among the passengers is Ethna Walls, an Irish medical student and a river dance star on holiday in Rio. Ethna's sister is Catherine.
Her last text was to say she was getting on the flight, she'd had a brilliant holiday.
Ethna is on board with 215 other passengers. They know their lives are in the hands of the three men in the cockpit, led by 58-year-old Captain Marc Dubois. What they may not know is just how much the captain and his team depend, perhaps disastrously, on the sophisticated automated systems of the plane, the Airbus A330. It is considered to be among the safest airplanes in the sky.
Airbus is proud of the fact they like to say that their plane is pilot-proof.
That's the good news. Here is the bad news.
Is it true that on any given flight, the pilots are at the controls only 3 minutes? A minute 30 on takeoff and a minute 30 on landing?
That's about right.
It is a cold fact of modern aviation. Planes pretty much fly themselves. The story of Flight 447 has ignited a firestorm of controversy about pilot training in this new era of automated flight.
We're moving towards automated operations where the pilot isn't even permitted to fly.
10 p.m. The flight is routine. The crew serves dinner and some passengers settle in to watch an in-flight movie. But 30 minutes later, the plane, cruising at 37,000 feet, begins to enter a heavy storm system about 800 miles off the coast of Brazil. Instead of flying around the storm, it continued to fly toward it, keeping the automatic pilot system on. Was that a bad decision?
It was certainly a different decision than others took that night.
Other pilots on that same route as Flight 447 choose to fly around the storm, more than 100 miles away from it.
They were more cautious and did go a bit further away.
At the same time, the location of the storm happens to coincide with a known dead zone of radio communication, out of reach of air traffic controllers on either side of the Atlantic. 10:35 p.m., the last radio transmission from the Air France flight, a routine call-out of flight coordinates, and then Air France 447 vanishes. No one would ever hear from the crew again. It wasn't until 4:41 a.m., 6 hours later, that French air traffic controllers finally realized something is terribly wrong.
Your attention, please.
By now, friends and family of the passengers are already waiting in the arrival terminal when word began to spread. Flight 447 has disappeared.
This never happens. Losing an aircraft out of cruise flight is just in itself extraordinary.
For hours, French air traffic control tries in vain to locate the A330. No other commercial jet in history has vanished so completely, without a witness, without a distress call, without even a trace on the radar. As news of the missing airplane whipped around the globe, now it fell to the crash investigators to solve the mystery. They sent a dozen search and rescue ships to the crash zone. It would take them 5 days to find anything. By then, much of the wreckage had been dispersed by the ocean's currents. Only a fraction was recovered, and just 50 of the 228 people who were on board that night. Many were believed to have sunk, still strapped in their seats, along with the plane and the black boxes, to the ocean floor. What little rescue crews did find provided a few tantalizing clues.
We know that there was no terrorist action or no bomb because the aircraft was intact at the moment of the crash.
And there are these clues. No oxygen masks were deployed. There was an empty jump seat with seatbelts retracted, and a life vest still floating, sealed in its packet. It seemed nobody had prepared for a crash. But without those black boxes, the evidence posed many more questions than it answered. French investigators invested 2 years and about $50 million trying to find that airplane, all without luck. So finally, they called in Mike Purcell and his team, the same organization that famously found the Titanic. With this underground robot, Purcell coaxed the Atlantic to finally give up its secrets.
And we knew immediately that we had found the airplane.
The robot returned with these photos, parts of the plane fuselage, other small aircraft parts, the galley. They also came back with something else.
Some human remains definitely put the focus on that this was a real tragedy and that a lot of people had lost their lives.
Not only did Purcell's team find the black boxes in the wreckage, after 2 years in the water, they still worked.
So when you finally heard what was on those black boxes, were you surprised?
Stalled.
When we come back, for the first time, you'll hear what was happening in the cockpit, the crew in chaos, and where was the lead pilot as Flight 447 was going down.